Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeff Mackler. I'm a National Secretary of Socialist Action, and I will be moderating this webinar today. Our subject is the struggle for Haiti's freedom, past and present. No to US imperialist intervention. No to Biden's mass deportation. Newcomers to the struggle for Haitian freedom might not know that Haiti was the first nation on earth to organize a slave rebellion that defeated the combined and multiple armies of Napoleon Bonaparte. And in 1804, Haiti won its freedom, some 60 years before slavery was ended in the United States by the American Civil War. Needless to say, the American slaveocracy, both North and South, were not very happy with the victory of the Haitian Revolution and the defeat of slavery. In fact, the world was shocked when Napoleon, who had the greatest armies in the world that marched across and conquered much of Europe, sent 2 or 3 fleets of armed forces to beat the upstart slaves, and they were all defeated, forcing, for at least temporarily, the French colonial government to accept the fact that the slaves had freed themselves. Haiti was no small item in the French colonial fortress. It was the richest colony of all of France. And the French colonialists extracted tremendous amounts of money from Haiti, mostly in sugar and other crops during the colonial period. When the Haitian revolutionaries sent a representative to Saint-Louverture to finalize agreements with France, they arrested him and never let him return. The central leader of the Haitian Revolution, which you'll hear about, is Dessalines, and he presided over the victory until some 25 years later, when the French organized an embargo and forced the Haitian people to literally pay reparations for having seized their property, and the property was slaves. That debt was paid off for many years, and finally, interestingly enough, it was transferred to the United States to the richest banks and the richest people, and that is the people who are today JP Morgan Chase, or the Rockefeller Morgan conglomerates who held the debt for the slaves that they insisted that the Haitian people pay back. So today we're going to explore not only Haiti's history, but the history of US intervention, of the United States maintaining slave labor conditions in that country, paying 11 and 19 cents an hour to the workers in this country, and the Biden administration's recent atrocities of deporting some 26,000 Haitians, a number that exceeds the Biden and Trump record in this country. Our speakers are 3. Our first, who has to leave a bit early, is Daoud Andre, who will be speaking with us by phone. He's a New York Haitian community activist. He's a moderator of the radio programs Haiti, Our Revolution Continues, and Eritrea, Papa Dessalines. Dessalines, again, is the leader of the 1804 revolution. Our second speaker, we hope will join us, is Ruben Johannem. He's with the Haiti Justice Committee of Minnesota. He's born in Haiti as well, a lifelong Haiti solidarity activist and relief worker, and an expert in post-colonial studies with an emphasis on former French colonies. So I'm really hoping that Ruben joins us. And our third and final speaker is Marty Goodman, a lifelong Haiti solidarity activist, beginning in his early years in Miami, Florida, and then in New York City, where he has lived for decades. Marty is the author of the book sold by Socialist Action, published by Socialist Action, called The Hell That Is Haiti. He's a member of the National Committee of socialist action. You can reach us at socialistaction.org and check out Marty's book. And our email is socialistaction@lmi.net. So with that, let's begin with Daoud Andre. Welcome, and we're going to time you for opening remarks of 10 or 12 minutes. And thanks again for joining us.
Okay, my name is Daoud Andre. As Jeff said, I'm an activist in the Haitian community here in New York. I'm a radio host in the Haitian community. About 18 years now, current program is named Héritier, Papa Dessalines, which means the children, the heirs of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. That is 4 days a week in the Haitian community in Creole, our language. And I also host a weekly program on WBAI, the Pacifica radio station here in New York, 99.5 FM, on Saturdays, 4 to 5 p.m. I'm a member of an activist organization that's named Komokoda. It's a Creole language acronym for Committee to Mobilize Against Dictatorship in Haiti. And this is an organization that's been active since 2014. So I want to thank Marty, want to thank Socialist Action for inviting us to share some comments in today's program. So about Haiti, as Jeff said, yes, Haiti is not just the first, but the only country where enslaved Africans fought and militarily defeated their oppressors, their enslavers, and they created an independent country. And it's an independent country that, despite all obstacles, exists to today, 218 years later. Our struggle for independence, it started, we always say that our ancestors, they never stopped fighting. They never stopped resisting, from the kidnapping and capture on the continent, on the slave ships. And as soon as they got over here, some of them ran away, and others, there's a Haitian historian named Jacques Casimir who always encourages us to call them captives instead of slaves, because these were individuals, and not just in Haiti, but throughout the Americas. They never accepted themselves as slaves. And the whites who had enslaved them tried to subdue them. They knew that they could never sleep with both eyes closed, because these were individuals that at the first opportunity would kill them and try to free themselves and their brothers and sisters. So in Haiti itself, struggle for independence, it started in August of 1791, and it's at what we call the ceremony of Bois Caïma. This is in the northern part of Haiti, where our ancestors, they had a gathering in the middle of August. We understand 13th to the 14th of August. And from that incident, they pledged to die rather than to live in bondage and to have their progeny know this thing called slavery. And a week later, the enslaved Africans in the northern part of Haiti rose up, and they burned down hundreds of sugarcane, coffee, indigo plantations. They killed more than 4,000 whites and enslavers, whites in Puerto Rico, in Jamaica, in Cuba. They wrote about that Saint-Domingue, which was the name of this French colony at the time. It appeared to be a bonfire. It's like the whole island was on fire. And anyway, this is the struggle that started in August of 1791, lasted 12 years until November of 1803, where in the final battle at Vertières, our ancestors defeated the French. And I should say in the process, they defeated the Spanish, they defeated the English, who also had designs on this colony. Jeff said it was an extremely rich colony, but this was the richest colony, the colony that brought most profit to Europe, we should say, not just to France. An example that is often given is that it brought more profit to France than the 13 colonies which eventually became the United States of America brought to England. And France dared to call it the Pearl of the Antilles. And of course, you can understand that while it was heaven for the whites, it was hell for our ancestors. In any event, our revolution, it was celebrated on January 1st, 1804. And I kind of joked about this with Jeff in the beginning when I just called. Many people outside of Haiti, they know the name of Toussaint Louverture, and you will still see today people talking about Toussaint Louverture as the leader of the Haitian Revolution. But in essence, the leader of our revolution was Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And this is why we call him Papa Dessalines, the father, the founder of our nation, the one who created our country. So it is a name we want people to understand, to remember, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. For many, many reasons, Europeans, enslavers, they raised Toussaint Louverture. They speak about Toussaint Louverture, who was the first leader of the movement, the first general. He was a governor of the island, we should say the entire island, what is now Dominican Republic as well, for France. He had a constitution in 1801, and he governed as a general for France, but by the time he was not sent actually to negotiate, the French, they captured him in Haiti, tied him up and shipped him to France as a prisoner. And he died at Fort de Joux, its prison in the mountains of Jura in France, on April 7th, 1803. So when you look at the dates, you realize quickly that Toussaint Louverture never knew that the project for freedom, for independence succeeded, because he had already died by that time. So that's the history of Haiti. It is this revolution that happened where the Africans freed themselves, and we like to say as well, without any support, any collaboration from the abolitionists in France or in the United States at the time. Because while many of them wanted better conditions They wanted an end of the slave condition, some of them, but few, if any of them, ever imagined that blacks, Africans, who many still considered to be inferior, would be able to defeat the armies of Europe and to create an independent country. For the most part, they believed we were not capable of something like this. I should say as well that Toussaint Louverture, in 1802, he had the largest army in the Americas, an army that stood stronger, more men than the army that the United States of America possessed in 1802. And in U.S. documents, you will find documentation that the United States was planning for an eventually invasion of Florida by Toussaint Louverture's army to free Africans, enslaved Africans here in the United States. So this was a great blow to Europe, to the United States, the revolution that happened in Haiti, this feat that our ancestors accomplished, and it did lead to a complete embargo, a boycott of this country by the whites, who completely surrounded this island. And the shithole condition that Mr. Trump is said to have spoken about dates, and it has its origin in that reality. The fact that the Europeans, the North Americans, they swore that this example would be crushed. It would not be allowed to thrive. And this is what Haiti is a victim of. Colonialism, neocolonialism, white supremacy, it affects the world. But it's a special punishment that they do reserve for Haiti. The New York Times series on Haiti recently, very interesting, but the ransom, they called it, it's not just that France alone could have imposed this, 150 million francs, later 90 million, that Haiti was forced at gunpoint to pay for recognition, not just by France, because before France did it, none of the European countries, save Russia, had recognized the independence of Haiti. The United States wouldn't do it until civil war over here. And we like to point out as well that at that time, New York Times was being run by Adolph Oakes when the U.S. takes over the financing, the lead role as an exploiter of Haiti. And the New York Times was a partner because, in fact, Adolph Oakes had gotten funding, organized funding to buy the New York Times from J.P. Morgan, who was then at National City Bank. And it was National City Bank that purchased the Bank of Haiti from France, French bankers. And it was the New York Times who applauded when Marines came to Haiti in December of 1914 to steal the reserves of Haiti, gold reserves, take them to New York, to the National City Bank over here. And so over the years, the leaders of the United States have changed, Democrats, Republicans, but it's the same reality. It's the same conviction that this example must be crushed. Today, Haiti is being run by, puppets of the United States since 2004, after coup against President Aristide. The United States was financing, supporting an armed opposition as well as a political opposition, and neither of them could get this job done, and the U.S. came to get President Aristide with its U.S. Special Forces. And since 2004, you've had U.S. Marines then handing power to what's called UN missions in Haiti, MINISTA. I have about 2 minutes to conclude.
You're actually 3 minutes over. How about if we take a break, hear from the other speakers, and then we'll have a further exchange. We'll put you right back on the list.
Okay, so 30 seconds if you allow.
Sure.
So right now we have this UN mandate. It's called BINI, a UN mission, and this coming Wednesday, the Security Council is set to announce the renewal. Our organization, Komokoda, Committee to Mobilize Against Dictatorship in Haiti, we will be having a protest to denounce the U.S. UN occupation of Haiti, Tuesday, 3 to 6 p.m. in front of the UN, 45th Street and 1st Avenue in Manhattan. And we encourage anyone within the sound of my voice who can come and bring their support to please join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daoud Andre, from the New York Haitian community, the moderator of the KPFA radio program.
I mean, if it was really something you need, I would definitely go. But like you said, trying to save money, and I don't know. I really don't think that makes a difference.
I'm asking everybody to mute. Can you please do that?
Not worth it. Not worth it. You're gonna have to do better than that.
Okay. Our next speaker is Ruben Joanna.
I'll go though. You're gonna go.
No, I don't go. I have karaoke.
Would you please, everybody, mute?
It's Judy Bello that needs to mute.
Okay. Judy, please mute. Okay. Our next speaker, who is late, but welcome. It's Ruben Joanna from the Haiti Justice Committee of Minnesota, born in Haiti, lifelong Haiti solidarity activist, relief worker, frequent visitor, and an expert on the post-colonial studies with an emphasis on former French colonies. Joanna, I want to say that, sorry you're late, but our first speaker, Daoud Andre, gave a rather comprehensive history of the struggle of the Haitian Revolution and its victory in 1804, the leadership role of Dessalines, Jean-Jacques, and brought us sort of up to date today. So we're asking our initial round of speakers, including you, to make opening remarks of 10 or 12 minutes. That'll be followed by Marty, and then I, as moderator, will ask questions and comments, and we'll have a chance for a comprehensive discussion of Haiti's past and present, prospects for liberation and opposition to U.S. imperialist intervention. Joanna, welcome.
Thank you very much for putting this forum together, and it's a pleasure to see that Haiti and his people still have folk that are committed to put the situation at the front page of what is going on. People that are still struggling to stand alongside the Haitian people. I was in Haiti 3 weeks ago, and what I saw seems to be outcome of everything that the previous speaker just mentioned regarding the situation of Haiti, from the confrontation with the colonial superpower prior to the War of Independence, and after the independence of Haiti, right away the struggle for liberation is over, but Haiti was living in isolation, and right away, the result of all the colonial superpower putting their strength together to strangle Haiti as a free nation become manifest throughout several forms of ransom and movement to destroy the freedom of Haiti, be it political freedom or economic or in terms of economy or in terms of the development of Haiti as a nation. All that has been stifled, has been pretty much decimated by the effort of the colonial superpower. And when I was in Haiti, the last draw situation is what is known today as gangsterization of the country, which results in a form of design, in a form that I call calamity by design. Because what happened right now, the people get to the point where every single sector of the economy has been destroyed one by one by one. And right now, the political will of the people doesn't even matter at this point because the ruling class of Haiti as puppet of international neo-colonial power are destroying the last hope of the nation of Haiti. And all that are exact results of what Haiti stood for as of 1803, the first free nation in the Western Hemisphere. I know United States became independent in 1776, around that time, and Haiti 26 years later. But may I remind you that in the United States, the freedom, the independence is the liberation, the freedom was only for European aristocrat settlers. There was still slavery in the US. The only free nation really in the hemisphere was Haiti. And the same discourse that were being held in the US for the class of the poor, even white poor people, that become today what they call wash, is the same attitude that all colonial powers have since independence day toward Haiti. That means Haiti is a bunch of deviant people, a bunch of feeble-minded people. And the colonial powers make sure that no other nation follow the example of Haiti. So I think what we're seeing today is the accumulation of all those policies of destruction from 1803 up to the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse, July 7 of last year. And we can see that what the people are trying to do or are trying to achieve, even after the first day of the independence, was being destroyed by France and her allies, be it the USA, be it England, be it Canada, even if they were having conflict between themselves. But somehow Haiti became what united these superpowers. And the last thing you can see how the administration of his name kind of escaped my mind, but they put together, as soon as President Jean-Bertrand Aristide came up with a number for the repayment of what we call the debt of independence, right away, France and the USA come up with a plan to get Aristide out of power. So what was true in 1803 is still true today, as we see the demolition of every single sector of the Haitian economy. And as it stands right now, what I saw last week in Haiti is hopelessness, despair, and collective anxiety. But I should also mention that the Haitian people have been to this day as resilient as can be. So not all hope is lost. We have the strength, the energy of the people, and also outsiders like you guys that are thinking about the struggle of the people of Haiti as we are doing it right now. So I couldn't be any more I feel this is a great privilege for me to be among the speakers tonight. So I don't know if I use up all my time, but I would like to refer to the moderator to give me a signal.
We'll go to our third speaker and then we'll have an exchange between the three of you. Just want to point out how amazing it is that the JP Morgan, the Rockefellers, and the Mellons took over the debt of the French colonial slave owners. Almost 100 years later, when King Leopold was the former owner of the Congo and slaughtered 10 million people in the world's greatest genocide, he extracted the wealth in rubber and ivory of that country. But he was forced to grant the mineral rights of the Congo, which had the largest mineral deposits in the world, to none other than JP Morgan and Mellon, who still own significant parts of the wealth of those countries. So here you have the United States, predatory nation, exploiting and murdering the Haitian people and continuing that policy 100 years later in the Congo, where they intervened with the United Nations to murder the elected president of that country, Patrice Lumumba. Our next speaker is Marty Goodman, a lifelong Haiti solidarity activist, has visited Haiti and has many friends there for decades. He's the author of the Socialist Action published book, The Hell is Haiti, and a member of the National Committee of Socialist Action. Welcome, Marty Goodman. You also have 10 or 12 minutes.
Okay, Jeff, can you hear me well?
I hear you perfectly.
All right, thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. I just want to say that Haiti is so rich in history and culture. I hope that I could at least skim much of it. So here I go. Haiti has been a teacher for me. I've been there several times during the overthrow of the fleeing of Baby Doc Duvalier in Port-au-Prince. And I was an election observer in 1990 when Aristide was elected. And I've been back several times since then. As a stringer for The Guardian, I was in Port-au-Prince, February 7, 1986, for the downfall of Baby Doc Duvalier, a US-backed dictator. I joined the million or so deliriously happy Haitians celebrating in the street. But the US imperialists put Duvalier on a plane to France and replaced it with more brutal army stooges. Of course, Duvalier escaped justice in Haiti. Wasting no time, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, bullets started ringing out and the streets were cleared in Port-au-Prince. No revolution, no change, lesson learned. Haiti is a nation of 11 million. It was born of a world's first slave revolution, as previous speakers have said. Victory was declared in 1804. It was the 19th century's version of the Russian and Cuban revolutions and had massive impact. And want to show everyone a great, great book called Avengers of the New World, a wonderful history of the Haitian Revolution and its impact. One of my favorite books. If you want more, put it on the chat. Haiti inspired slave rebellions in the US South, in the Latin American independence struggle, the anti-colonial struggles of the 20th century, the US civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid struggle, and the Black Lives Matter protests of recent years. France had so ruthlessly exploited African slaves, making Haiti so wealthy that it was called the Pearl of the Antilles, already mentioned. Haiti, led by Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, took on Napoleon's army, the most powerful land army in the world, and kicked his racist ass. Revolutionary Haiti was despised and feared by the French and American slavocracies. Later, with French gunboats off of Haiti's shores, France demanded what would today be $21 billion in today's money as payment for the loss of its slaves. An incredible thing, amazing that you could pay for human beings like that. Anyway, paying the debt helped keep Haiti's masses poor. It was an enormous sum for a small country, but it was finally paid off in 1947. It was robbery, and no Western quote unquote democracy objected. The US for its part did not recognize Haiti until 1862 and maintained a trade embargo like today's embargo on socialist Cuba. By the way, I was in Cuba for May Day, and believe me, conditions for working people there versus conditions in Haiti, light years apart. Even though things are difficult in Cuba, light years apart. No homeless on the streets, no piles of garbage, all that. No poverty. In 2003, Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide launched a crusade to demand that France repay the $21 billion that it had robbed. The result, a 2004 CIA and French coup deposed Aristide soon after that. France's ambassador to Haiti at that time, a guy named Bacard, said in an interview that France and the US had effectively orchestrated, quote, a coup, end quote, against Mr. Aristide, and that his abrupt removal was, quote, probably a bit about that, end quote. Haiti was under a bloody 19-year US Marine occupation beginning in 1915, ordered by Democratic Party President Woodrow Wilson, whose slogan was making the world safe for democracy, end quote. 5,000 protesters hit the streets in lower Manhattan by Union Square and went down to Foley Square. There were some scuffles with the police. It was quite significant. Anyway, world safe for democracy, like in Alabama and Mississippi. Anyway, his naval commander was liberal icon Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who bragged that he wrote the Haitian Constitution. Arrogant imperialist. But once again, Haiti rose to expel imperialism. Known as the Cacos, they were led by Haitian patriot Charlemagne Perrault. Thousands lost their lives in a war whose valor is largely unrecognized by the entire world. Haiti was, according to one account, the first country to experience aerial bombardment with the biplanes. Sadly, the Caco rebellion was defeated a few years later. I wish I can go into that more, but can't. The first US occupation changed the Haitian constitution and began racist practices, like blacks, Haitians couldn't walk in certain parts in their own country. Critically, it also created a new Haitian army trained in counterinsurgency that served well the decades of bloody dictatorship there. Prime example, the 29-year reign of the US-backed Duvalier family dictatorship, 57 through 86, which killed some 50,000 opponents. By the early 1980s, the Haitian refugee influx into South Florida met a racist immigration policy that denied the Black boat people, as they were called, the right to political asylum, while giving carte blanche citizenship to the mostly white counter-revolutionary Cubans in Miami. I was there, I was living there, where I grew up. Leading the struggle was the Haitian Refugee Center of Miami, led by Haitian father Gerard Jean Just. Everyone loved him. Supporters like myself and the great Haitian rights advocate, Jack Lieberman, marched for Haitian asylum rights maybe 100 times. In fact, July 2nd was the anniversary of the historic 1980 Judge Lawrence King decision, which freed hundreds of Haitians from the Florida gulag known as the Chrome Detention Center on the edge of the Everglades, the site of many protests. Okay, that was fantastic, but the camp soon refilled. The racist double standard against Haitians continued under every Republican and Democrat. Every one. My first protest was against, what's his name? The Peanut Man in Georgia. Haiti would suffer many more violations of its sovereignty. The US led a UN occupation in 1994 that reinstated the popularly elected reform president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who was sent into an exile by a CIA-backed coup in late 91 that also murdered by its end in 1994, murdered about 6,000 Haitians, 1,000 in the first day. CIA-backed coup fighting for freedom. Aristide returned under onerous imperialist imposed and neoliberal conditions, in addition to the travesty of a US occupation in a land freed by a Black revolution. The deal included, quote, reconciliation with the coup butchers, which Aristide agreed to unwillingly, but he agreed to it and signed off on the Governor's Island Accord, which basically authorized the US-UN imperialist occupation. And by the way, this UN action was led almost entirely by the United States on the ground and behind closed doors. According to the New York Times, Aristide was told, quote, sign it, don't read it. That is the Governor's Island Accord. Look it up, it's there. Democrat Bill Clinton oversaw the 22,000 US-led troop operation, vigorously supported by the Democratic Party, which included Bernie Sanders and the Black Congressional Caucus. The US intent was clearly racist, unwilling to accept a Haitian solution that was potentially revolutionary. No, everyone has got the right to rebel again, except for the Haitians and the Palestinians. By the way, I was within 100 feet of Aristide in the bleachers at his inaugural in February of '91 in Port-au-Prince, when he appointed future coup maker General Raoul Cedras to head the Haitian army. Making the same deadly mistake as Chile's Salvador Allende, Aristide told the crowd that Cedras had promised that he would respect the Constitution. Cedras was full of shit. It was later revealed in the New York Times that Cedras was on the CIA payroll along with the junta leaders. Also on the CIA gravy train was the paramilitary goons known as FRAP, led by the killer Emmanuel Toto Constant. Years later, Constant got special entry into the US and avoided Haitian justice. And I would like to point out one more book. I like to show many books, but I just read this one. It's called Hideous Dream by Stan Goff, who was a special forces soldier in Haiti during that occupation, who supported Aristide and was told to support FRAP and the coup makers as legitimate partners in Haiti. An amazing book, very entertaining too. In 2004, there was a second CIA-backed coup against Aristide, resulting in more death and an ongoing CIA-backed campaign to discredit Aristide. The US had spent $26 million in attacking Aristide for proposing a very modest increase in the minimum wage. Haiti is ready for revolution. Here are the facts. Haiti's average income is less than $2 a day. Not an hour, a day. Unemployment has been estimated, what I've seen is between 35 to 70%. The UN says around 4.3 million people experience high levels of acute food insecurity. Stolen from Haiti was a $2 billion low interest loan on oil purchases from Venezuela, known as the Petrocari project. It was targeted to projects like schools and hospitals, but the 2 million was ripped off by the last presidents and their cronies. All gone. Kidnapping by armed gangs is at the highest per capita rate in the world in Haiti today. There were 803 kidnappings from January to October 21. Armed gangs control more than half of Haiti and half of the capital of Port-au-Prince. Rapes by gangs are common. On August 14th, 21, magnitude earthquakes, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck southern Haiti with devastating impact. You remember the one in 2010 was even worse. Around 2,200 people were killed and hundreds remain missing and injured. Thousands remain injured. Gangs greatly impeded the rescue and rebuilding. The rescue operations couldn't get through without going through these gangs. There were 26,500 deportations of Haitians by Biden, who used Trump's racist Title II immigration order enacted under the guise of stopping COVID at the Mexican border. I just want to pause for a second. Those who said that Biden would be better than Trump, you can't convince any Haitian of that. I've yet to see one. But many Haitian refugees say that they never got a COVID test or learned the result. The largest number of deportations at the border, 38%, are Haitians. The deportees were given no opportunity to make an asylum claim as mandated by US and international law. Haitian deportees returned to a country with few jobs and virtually no COVID vaccination programs. Said Ruben Garcia, founder of a migrant shelter in Texas, said, quote, Trump got his wall. It's called Title 42. Today, Biden backs the de facto Haitian dictator, Dr. Ariel Henry, as did Trump. See, Trump, Biden, same. Henry rules by fiat, firing those who investigate him for his role in ex-President Jovenel Moise's murder in July of 21. Gunned down by Colombian commandos, many with US training. Despite massive protests, Henry refuses to step down as required by the Haitian Constitution. Okay, last part. The electoral road to fundamental change is a failure. Nowhere more glaringly so than in Haiti. An alternative to the misery must be built. Haiti needs a bold, revolutionary socialist party led by the working people, with the support of the peasantry and the unemployed. A party that will fight in day-to-day struggles, but will ultimately smash the corrupt capitalist ruling class owned by the US and international imperialism, just like Haiti smashed French slavery. Today's middle-class politicians of the Montana Accord and the splintered Lavalas movement of Aristide can only recycle the status quo. Revolutionary Cuba, with its equality, free healthcare, and education, is an example for Haiti and the entire planet. Socialist Action says no to US imperialism, US UN out of Haiti. Long live the Haitian Revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Ruben, and thank you, Dowd. I'd just like to make a couple of remarks, and then I'm going to ask the three speakers in the original order to make comments of 3 or 4 minutes to wrap up their views on Haiti today, where the struggle is going, and what we can do in the solidarity movement. But I must observe that the horrors that the three speakers attested to in Haiti are not unique on the world scene. The United States government maintains 1,100 military bases in 110 countries around the world. Invasions, occupations, interventions, death squad murders, assassinations, drone bombings, and all the rest are the stock and trade of the United States government, its armies, its secret forces, its privatized death squads, and its CIA maneuvers. The Haitian horror is no exception, but the struggle of the Haitian people over 200 years is exemplary. It's the struggle of all humanity fighting back for their freedom and dignity and right to self-determination against the powers that be. We will see these kind of struggles inspired by the Haitian Revolution taking place around the world. So with that, and because we know that Dowd has to leave, take 3 or 4 minutes to summarize your remarks about where we stand today. And let me thank you so much for participating and joining us. Dowd Andre, for those who came late, is a New York Haitian Solidarity community activist, moderator of the radio KPFA program, Haiti, Our Revolution Continues. And Eritrea Papa Dessalines. Papa Dessalines is the founder of the Haitian slave revolt that won Haitians' independence. Dowd, you're on.
Yes, well, I'm laughing because Jeff had stopped me in the time. I'm sure I was a couple of minutes over, and our brother, this is Ruben, had stopped himself, but Marty went way beyond the time. And Jeff, I think it would have been good for you to let Marty know that it's a 10-minute limit. Anyway, this is principle. I think that is important, and I did send a message to Marty. Well, what I want to say before I go, and I do have to leave, that it's important for folks who say that they support the struggle of the Haitian people to understand that the Haitian people are a strong people, that the Haitian people achieved this feat, as again, I said that already, by ourselves. And I was listening to Marty's, I don't know if it's recommendations, but like what the Haitian people should do or going to do. The Haitian people are going to do what the Haitian people are going to do when we are ready to do it. I want to encourage the supporters of Haiti to do what Malcolm X had recommended that the the supporters of the struggle of Black people over here to do, to organize and to fight here within communities that are responsible for the reality that exists in the world, the suffering that exists. Everywhere you look in the world today, you will see the claws of US imperialism and its allies. And the fact, and Haiti shows that very well, like their domination and their intent to dominate the world, it's not ended. The countries that were responsible for slavery, imagine they're still running the world today. There are those with the money, there are those with the weapons, there are those who still think that the resources of the African continent, of the non-white world, belongs to them. And it's a sad situation as well that we find that same kind of arrogance many times from our friends, from our supporters, quote unquote, on the left. And it's important to understand that there needs a revolution here in the United States. And more than we need a revolution in Haiti. And of course, we are working for a revolution in Haiti, another revolution. My program on BAI, it's called Our Revolution Continues, because we believe that our revolution must continue and it needs to continue. But I want, Malcolm had encouraged folks, white folks who wanted to join his organization, that it's a Black organization. It's an organization of African people living over here. And please mobilize in your community with folks over here, because if the United States and France and Canada changed, were no longer doing what they've been doing in Haiti, for example, the Haitian people would not be in the reality that we are. Like so, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point. I think that is clear. I want to give opportunity to other people to speak, but I really want to emphasize that point, that the Haitian people, we are grown folk. We earned our right to be by the struggle of our ancestors. And yeah, you can help, you can load our gun. You can, and it's not many progressives who can just do that in a way. But more than anything, do not tell us this is what we have to do, this is the path, this is the way. We are grown enough and clear-minded enough. We are the children of Jacques Dessalines. So I want to thank again Marty for the invitation to be here. I do have to leave. I want to thank Jeff, thank Ruben, thank Socialist for the invitation, and the dialogue, it will continue, and our revolution in Haiti, it will continue as well. We have no doubt about that. Thank you very much, family. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dowd. Have a wonderful day, and your remarks are well taken. With that, let's go to Joanna, for Ruben Joanna with the Haiti Justice Committee of Minnesota, a native-born Haitian who has a specialty in post-colonial studies with an emphasis on former French colonies. Thank you for being with us, Ruben, and welcome. And what are your closing remarks? Take 3, 4, 5 minutes and tell us what perspectives you think emerge from our discussion and what the future holds.
The pleasure is all mine, Madi, and thank you again with all my heart And the Haitian people are with me to say thank you again. Well, uh, some of the speakers mentioned Haiti is a nation of fighters. Although we've been losing a lot of battles for the past 2 centuries, but remember, we endured slavery for for more than 3 centuries before we finally get our strength together through some leaders with great vision, such as Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Capalamo, all those guys. They emerge out of nowhere, out of the sugarcane plantation, out of the uh, slavery that were being forced on people of African descent in Saint-Domingue for quite some time. So it might look hopeless. We might look helpless, but do not let that fool you, because the same spirit, the same strength that we found in Jean-Jacques Dessalines is still in the Haitian people. The same kind of strategies that Toussaint Louverture put out to counter to as a counter reaction to Napoleon military might. It's still in our peasants. It's still in our homeless people in the street of Port-au-Prince, in the street of Cape Haitian, in the street of Gonaïve, and all over the rural Haiti. It might take some time. Maybe I might not see that during my time on this planet, but I am sure, just like when they were deporting Toussaint Louverture, he said, by deporting me, you're just cutting the trunk of the tree, but the roots are very deep in the ground. The revolution will survive by its roots, by the stump. The revolution of Haiti will continue to produce marvelous results, because we have surprised the world in the past, and we will do it again. We will do it again as we look on Cuba, where people have a high, I don't know, maybe the highest literacy rate in the hemisphere, maybe in the, I don't know. They have conquered diseases. They have healthcare facilities. They have, in fact, you see, a leader emerge to lead the Cuban people towards a life of dignity. I hope and I expect no less from the Haitian people. Leaders will emerge that will not be puppets of imperialism, puppets of the USA, puppets of France, Canada, or London, or whatever. And the oligarchs that are using Haiti as a commercial counter to carry out the evil deeds against the people of Haiti, I'm telling them their days are numbered. Not too long ago, there was a group exactly like those oligarchs that were creating hell for the population of Haiti. They used to be the planters, the settlers, the colonialists. They think they had it all under control with their weapons, with their churches to control, to brainwash people. They think they got it all, but they're surprised. the surprise was was great when Dessalines and Capoelamore, Clairvaux, all those guys stood to say that was enough. We understand that no slave owner would welcome those movements, but we still have some strides that we need to push out to the world. So we will keep on fighting, and we're going to keep on relying on people like you guys who are standing with us, who are being the voice of the Haitian people, to keep the dialogue alive, to remind people who want to collaborate, want to join forces with the Haitian people in whatever form they are able to. We welcome them. And we are telling the world, we are telling the planet that the fight goes on. The Haitian people and everybody who are victims of imperialism, of imperialist exploitation, will have their day in a future that is not so far away. And I return the mic to the moderator with my heartfelt thanks and gratefulness. Thank you guys. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
Jeff, you're muted.
You're muted, Jeff. Jeff, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Ruben, Joanna, for your closing, heartfelt, warm, and loving remarks. That's the spirit that we, of unity and solidarity, that we want to advance in every liberation struggle. It's only this kind of unity that comes from the heart and the knowledge of history and the past that allows us to build the type of massive mobilizations to bring the imperialist peace to bay. Your work is deeply appreciated. Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, we're going to hear some closing remarks from Marty Goodman on the same themes. And then I'm going to end the recording, and we're going to go to some informal discussion where I'm going to ask everyone present if they'd like to make some remarks for a minute or two, some comments, some suggestions, and then we'll have Ruben and Marty make very brief closing remarks, and we'll call it a day. So with that, Marty, you're on for 3 or 4 minutes. And Marty Goodman, again, a lifelong Haiti solidarity activist, visited Haiti many times as a journalist, a election observer, a reporter, has many friends, and is the author of the Socialist Action book, The Hell That Is Haiti, and a member of the National Committee of Socialist Action. You can contact Socialist Action through our website, socialistaction.org, or email us at socialistaction@lmi.net. You can contribute through our website, socialistaction.org. And if you're interested in joining, let us know. So with that, we'll go to Marty Goodman for closing remarks, and then we'll go back to the audience. Marty, you're on.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to encourage people to look at my Haiti articles at socialistaction.org, and also of late articles on the Amazon labor struggle, the struggle in India, and some other stuff. I think you hit it on the head, Ruben, that there needs to be more solidarity with Haiti. I noticed through all these years of doing solidarity work that Haiti is often left out of the picture entirely in lists and speeches of people. They talk about struggles here or there, and all valid, all wonderful. But somehow Haiti is missing. And we need to mobilize to bring that to the fore. And we need to organize solidarity with Haiti. I hope I could make it to this Tuesday rally Daoud spoke of at the UN. I may be going though to DC on Tuesday for Mexican president. We want to remind him about his promises to Julian Assange and speak up for him. So I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But yes, it's quite true. We need a lot more organizations on the ground in Haiti, working class organizations. I'm not being a dogmatist or anything, but you watch, you know, these NGOs and so on, they get waylaid by careerism and opportunists. Not everyone, but that's the general. There's 10,000 NGOs in Haiti, believe it or not. It's called the Nation of NGOs. Anyway, yes, let's build that solidarity. And in New York, I know at least on July 28th, the day of the 1915 occupation of Haiti, there used to be speakouts denouncing imperialism and the US role in Haiti. And that has evaporated. And I really think a real working class struggle needs to evolve in Haiti, and an organization that, yes, is part of a political party, but work within every avenue that you could possibly find to show support for the working people, the vast unemployed, and the peasantry in the countryside. Haiti is a great historical beacon like no other. And if you dig into some of these movements in the last 100 years, you'll find Haiti popping up here and there as inspiration points. Douglas, was his first name? The black philosopher, historian, Frederick Douglass, yes, was the first US ambassador to Haiti. So there is that interconnection and that historical reference. People in New York City marched in solidarity against the intervention in Haiti with Haitians, with Black folks from around the city and the region. So we need, Haiti was even a presidential issue at that time. It was made into an issue in the presidential debates, intervention in Haiti. We got to bring that back and remind our comrades and friends that you cannot leave Haiti out. This is our beacon of struggle in a world that was so racist and horrible. They stood up to the greatest imperial power in the world and beat them up and kicked their ass. So victory to Haiti, victory to the Haitian Revolution. Let's struggle forward.
Thank you, Marty Goodman. Thanks to our panelists. And now let's proceed with informal discussion. We'd like to hear what you have to say, please, because we have many. Make it a minute or two. And I thank you on behalf of Socialist Action. You can check us out at socialistaction.org. Okay.